We have now looked at 10 of the 11 group factors that Yalom has identified as therapeutic factors. Okay? The last one we're going to dive deeply into is cohesion. Cohesion is in many ways one of the most important factors of group work. Cohesion pertains to working cooperatively on the group task. Now, to do this, for all group members to be on the same page, working through issues together, they have to first go through this stormy conflict period in which conflict is worked through. When we look at stages of group development, in other words, when we get to a place where members are working collaboratively and cooperatively together, that happens after conflict has occurred, after conflict's been worked through. So conflict precedes cohesion, most typically. There's a famous quote that I think Dreykus came up with, who's a follower of Adler. It goes something like this: without conflict, there can be no growth. It's this idea that conflict is actually a fundamental, important component to change. And I think that's true. I think that in order for us to grow as people, we often have to work through conflicts. So what we need to do then is to work through that interpersonally in a safe environment in which you feel supported by the leader and the other group members. And so as the leader, it's important for you to establish safety. Now, you establish safety through making sure that strong, covert hostility that's underlying, that's not on top of the surface, is being brought up and discussed in a safe manner. Because anything that's way down that's not discussed, that's kind of, maybe there's snickering or there's eye rolls, that can really hinder group work, and that needs to be worked through. At the same time, we have to be careful with how we phrase and time our work on conflict. If we do it too quickly, if we bring it up too quickly and too intensely, it can cause the group to become overwhelmed and fragmented, like they'll take camps, for example, against each other. So we have to bring it up gently, slowly, but steadily in group work. Yalom has some useful strategies for how to kind of manage these high conflict moments. The first thing that he does is he will pause the action when it gets too heated, and he'll then engage the group in what's known as process illumination and process commentary, which is where basically the group members will be asked to comment on the last few minutes and what they observed, what their own thoughts are about that, and that kind of reduces the energy in the room. The second thing that Yalom does is that he'll tell the group members at conflict that they will be of great use to each other during the group. And that's so powerful and so true, because often what happens is group members at conflict have these transference issues towards each other. Right? He has a really good example in Yalom's book. He has this client called Vincent, or group member Vincent, he talks about. Vincent grew up as an Italian American. He kind of moved away from that kind of in his early adulthood and really disowned that part of his identity. In a group setting, he meets another Italian American who actually is quite obviously identifies with his roots. And it causes a lot of irritation and anger in Vincent about this other group member. And clearly he has issues there to work through. And so that's an example of how sometimes conflict can actually be an indication that there is work to be done, if you will. So I'm going to talk last about the risk of conflict and harsh conflict and why we need to manage it. Too harsh conflict can result in dropout for clients, and dropouts beget dropouts, especially early on in group work. And so you want to be mindful of conflict. I'll also maybe close on this note, actually. In some groups, working through conflict is not that relevant, and cohesion occurs on the basis of, and we'll see this in a moment, what's known as a homogeneous group, where group members are very similar, they experience the same things, like they all have depression, or they're all women. That can reduce the amount of conflict in a group and cause more cohesion to occur quickly. Now, in the long-term outpatient group, you want actually a more diverse group, so you get more diverse perspectives, and that in itself engenders conflict, which needs to be worked through in that setting. But I just want to make it clear that not all groups require that level of conflict to be worked through to be successful groups. And that concludes this video lecture on cohesion.